The first spark of compassion, the day began like any other, but no one knew it would turn into a moment that touched every heart present. The sun was bright, the streets of the small town were busy, and people hurried with their lives. Yet, in the middle of the noise, something unusual caught the attention of those who passed by. On a corner near a quiet cafe, a young boy sat on the steps, his head down, his eyes swollen with tears. His small backpack looked worn, and his hands gripped it tightly as if it was the only thing he had left in the world. People noticed him, but most turned away. Some whispered, some shook their heads, but none stopped. His pain was visible, yet the crowd flowed around him like water around a rock. That was when a man in a simple black jacket, with quiet steps and a humble presence, slowed down. It was Keanu Reeves. He had been walking without drawing attention, his calm face hidden under the shadow of his cap. But when he saw the boy, he did not walk past. He stopped, and in that pause the world seemed to hold its breath. Keanu knelt beside the boy, his voice soft. He did not ask the usual questions that strangers ask. Instead, he said, "You look like you carry something heavy. Can I sit with you for a while?" The boy looked up, surprised that someone cared enough to notice. His lips trembled, and for a moment he could not speak. Finally, he whispered, "Nobody listens. Nobody cares." Those words, simple yet powerful, cut through the air like a blade. Keanu felt them in his chest. Inside the cafe, two women watched the scene unfold through the glass. One was Ana de Armas, who had stopped in for coffee before heading to a rehearsal. Beside her sat Sweeney, who had been laughing only moments earlier. But now their smiles faded, their eyes fixed on the moment outside. They felt something stir within them, something that called louder than their own plans for the day. Without hesitation, they rose from their seats and walked out, joining Keanu and the boy. Ana crouched down on the other side of the child, brushing a strand of hair gently away from his eyes. She spoke softly, almost like a sister would. "Sometimes life feels heavier than we can carry alone, but you are not alone right now." Sydney knelt too, her hand resting lightly on the boy's shoulder. "Whatever it is, we will listen," she said, her tone steady and warm. The boy looked at the three faces around him, faces the world admired, but who now looked at him not as stars, not as icons, but as people who cared. His lips parted, and slowly he shared his truth. He spoke of how he felt forgotten at home, how his father worked far away, and how his mother struggled with her own pain. He said he felt invisible, as if his life did not matter. Every word was heavy, and every word shook the hearts of those listening. The crowd began to notice. Some stopped in their tracks, whispering as they recognized who the three adults were. But the magic of the moment was not their fame, it was their compassion. Passers-by saw how Keanu, Ana, and Sydney gave the boy their full attention, not rushing, not pretending, but truly listening. The crowd grew silent, their curiosity turning into reflection. Keanu placed his hand gently on the boy's backpack and said, "Sometimes the hardest thing is to believe that our story is not finished yet. I have been where you are. I have felt broken, but life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it." Ana added, "Your story matters. You matter." Sydney's voice trembled as she whispered, "Never think you are invisible. You are seen, and you are loved." In that moment, the boy's tears did not stop, but they changed. They were no longer tears of despair, but of release. His pain had been heard, his silence had been broken, and strangers had become a circle of kindness around him. The crowd around them felt something stir within their own hearts. Some who had walked by earlier returned, standing quietly as if witnessing a sacred act. An elderly woman wiped her own tears. A father picked up his child and held him tighter. People began to understand that compassion was not just words, but action, and that humility and respect could change someone's entire day, maybe even their entire life. What began as a moment between one boy and three kind souls grew into something bigger. The town, usually lost in its daily rush, had slowed down. People had paused to watch, but more than that, they had paused to feel. And in that pause, seeds of kindness were planted in every heart. The boy finally whispered, "Thank you," his voice fragile but full of hope. The three smiled at him, not as celebrities, but as friends who had shown him that he mattered. No cameras, no stage, no rehearsed lines, just pure compassion shining in the daylight. And while the world outside that small corner cafe kept moving, those who witnessed it would never forget the lesson of that day, that a single act of compassion, given with humility, could ripple outward and inspire countless others. The ripple of kindness the boy sat between Keanu, Anna, and Sydney, his eyes still wet, but his breathing calmer than before. For the first time in a long time, he felt that his voice had weight. He felt that someone finally cared. Yet, in the middle of this fragile calm, a man from the crowd stepped forward. His face was lined with years of hardship. His clothes were plain and his voice was rough. "Words are easy," the man said, his tone sharp. "You sit here telling this boy his life matters, but what happens when you leave? Will you still care tomorrow? Will you still remember his face when you return to your rich lives?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some nodded at his words. Others frowned. The boy lowered his head again, fear flashing in his eyes. Keanu turned slowly, his expression calm but steady. He spoke in a low voice that carried strength. "You are right. Words without action mean nothing. But today, we can choose to do more than talk." Anna looked at the man, her eyes gentle but firm. Kindness is not measured by wealth or fame. It is measured by what we do in the moment we are called to act. If we walk away, then we fail not only him, but ourselves. Sydney added softly, "Sometimes even small acts change a life. Sometimes it starts with listening and grows into something bigger." The man's jaw tightened. His bitterness was not born from anger at them, but from wounds of his own past. "I have seen promises made and broken. I have seen children like him forgotten. What makes today different?" There was silence. The crowd leaned closer, waiting. Keanu glanced at the boy, then back at the man. "Because today, you are here too. You see him now. I see him. We all do. And maybe for the first time he is not invisible. That alone is different." Those words struck something deep. The man's eyes softened for a moment, though he quickly turned his face away. But the tension had already shifted. What could have turned into conflict instead became reflection. People in the crowd began whispering, their voices thoughtful, no longer filled with doubt, but with possibility. Then, something unexpected happened. The boy reached into his worn backpack and pulled out a small sketchbook. Its pages were frayed, its corners bent, but inside were drawings, messy, simple, yet filled with heart. He showed it with trembling hands. "This is all I have," he whispered. "I draw so I can forget the pain, but nobody ever wants to see them." Anna's eyes lit up as she gently flipped through the pages. She saw hope, sadness, and dreams all tangled in the rough lines of pencil. "These are not just drawings," she said. "They are pieces of your heart, and hearts should never be hidden." Sydney smiled through tears. "You have a gift, even if you don't believe it yet." Keanu looked at the boy with quiet pride. "Art is not about perfection. It is about truth. And you have spoken truth through your hands. Don't ever think it has no value." The crowd leaned closer. Some people even taking pictures, but not because of who Keanu, Anna, or Sydney were. They wanted to remember the boy, his courage, his art. Whispers spread, people saying they wanted to help, others asking how they could support him. A ripple was forming, one act of compassion turning into many. The man who had spoken earlier stepped back toward them. He looked at the drawings too, his eyes lingering on one picture of a house with a broken window and a single figure inside. His voice cracked as he said, "I used to draw like this when I was young. Then life took it away from me." He placed a hand over his chest. "Don't let anyone take it away from you." For the first time, the man smiled, though faintly. The boy looked up at him, surprised, and for a brief second, their pain connected like two mirrors reflecting the same wound. Keanu stood and faced the crowd. This boy reminded us today that kindness is not something we plan. It happens when we choose to stop, to see, and to care. Every one of us here has that power. The question is, will we use it? The air grew heavy, not with sadness, but with a quiet determination. Strangers looked at each other, realizing they were no longer just bystanders. They were part of something larger, something that could grow if they chose to carry it forward. And in that moment, the story of one boy, 3 kind souls, and a doubtful man began to spread through the town like fire. The test of doubt as the boy held his sketchbook close to his chest, the crowd around him began to change. What had started as quiet curiosity now grew into conversations, people whispering to each other about what they had seen and felt. But where compassion grows, doubt often follows. A voice from the back of the crowd rose above the silence, sharper than before. "You are making this into a show," a woman said, her eyes narrow. "It is easy for famous faces to kneel down, to say sweet words, but when the cameras are gone, when the noise fades, will this boy still matter to you?" The crowd shifted again. Some nodded in agreement, some shook their heads. The boy froze, his fragile hope shaken. The sketchbook trembled in his hands. His lips quivered, but no words came out. Keanu turned toward the woman. His voice was steady, calm, yet filled with weight. "You are right to ask that question. Too many times people are lifted up in one moment and left alone in the next. I know how it feels when the world forgets. But I promise you, this is not for cameras and this is not for show. This is about a human life that matters." Anna stepped forward, her tone gentle but clear. "Compassion is not measured by how long the world watches. It is measured by the choice we make right now. We cannot solve everything in one day, but we can choose not to turn away today. That is where it begins." Sydney's eyes filled with quiet strength as she added, "Every act of kindness is a seed. Even if the world forgets tomorrow, the boy will not forget today, and that can be enough to change the path of his life." The woman crossed her arms, still skeptical, but her gaze softened slightly. The boy finally spoke, his voice trembling but brave. "I don't need promises for tomorrow. I just need to know I matter today." Those words pierced through the air. Silence spread once more, and even the woman who had doubted lowered her eyes. Then something unexpected happened. From the other side of the street, an older man approached. His steps were slow, his cane tapping against the pavement. His eyes carried years of wisdom, and his presence seemed to draw attention without effort. He looked at the boy, then at Keanu, Anna, and Sydney, and finally at the crowd. "I have lived a long life," the old man said, his voice soft yet powerful. "I have seen kindness rise, and I have seen it die when people chose pride over compassion. What you see here is rare. Do not waste it with doubt. Do not poison it with suspicion. This boy needed to be seen, and today he was seen. That matters more than you realize." The boy's eyes filled again with tears, but this time they were tears of relief. Someone older, someone who had lived through so much, had spoken for him. The crowd fell quiet, listening to the weight of the old man's words. He stepped closer and gently touched the boy's shoulder. "Child, never believe you are invisible. I once thought the same. I grew up poor, forgotten, unseen. But I survived because one person told me I mattered. Only one, and it was enough to keep me alive. Sometimes one act of compassion is all it takes to carry a soul through the storm." The boy looked up at him, his lips parting in wonder. "You were like me," he whispered. The old man nodded slowly. "Yes, and I see myself in you now." Keanu, Anna, and Sydney stood silently, letting the moment breathe. Their hearts swelled with respect for the old man's honesty. This was no longer just about comforting a boy. It was about awakening everyone present to their own humanity. The woman who had doubted earlier wiped her eyes and whispered, "Maybe I was wrong." And just like that, the circle of compassion widened again. But beneath the surface of hope, there lingered a new tension. For the boy, this moment was light in his darkness. Yet deep inside, he still wondered, would it last? Could kindness be more than just a fleeting spark? And that question would soon be answered in ways none of them expected. When shadows appear, the boy sat quietly, his sketchbook pressed against his chest as if it were a shield. The crowd that had gathered around him was no longer restless. It was calm, even tender, touched by the honesty of the moment. But just as peace began to settle, a new sound broke the silence. Loud footsteps echoed across the street, sharp and hurried. A man in his 30s pushed through the crowd, his face tense and his eyes filled with frustration. His clothes were worn, his hands rough from hard labor. People stepped aside as he moved closer, his voice rising. "What are you all doing here? Why are you making a scene with my son?" The boy froze, his eyes wide with fear. His lips parted, but no words came out. The sketchbook slipped from his hands and fell onto the ground. Keanu bent down, picking it up gently before the pages could tear. He looked at the man calmly and said, "We were listening to him. He needed someone to hear him." The man's face hardened. "He does not need strangers. He has me. I am his father." His tone was sharp, but beneath it was something more complicated, something wounded. Anna stepped forward, her voice soft. "He was not trying to shame you. He was trying to share what was in his heart. Sometimes children hold pain they cannot speak at home. It does not mean you are a bad father. It means he needed help to open his voice." The man's eyes flickered with conflict. Anger burned in them, but so did exhaustion. "You do not understand. I work day and night for him. I break my back so he can eat. And still, he sits here crying as if I have given him nothing." The boy finally spoke, his voice breaking. "I know you work hard. I know you try. But I miss you. I feel like I have no one." His small hands trembled as he reached toward his father. "I do not want money. I just want you." The words struck harder than any blade. The father's chest rose and fell, his anger melting into pain. His eyes glistened, though he tried to hide it. The crowd was silent, watching the raw wound of a family laid bare before them. Sydney knelt beside the boy and said softly, "Sometimes the strongest love is hidden behind tired hands, but love without presence feels like emptiness. Today is not about blame. It is about healing." The old man with the cane stepped closer, his voice steady. "Son, I was a father once too. I worked until my bones ached, thinking money was enough. But I was wrong. My children needed my presence more than my labor. Do not repeat my mistake." The father lowered his head, his hands shaking. The crowd could see his battle, pride pulling one way, guilt pulling another. His voice cracked as he whispered, "I do not know how to fix it. I am so tired." Keanu placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You do not have to fix everything in one day. You just have to start. Sit with him. Listen to him. Sometimes that is all it takes." The father looked at his son, who was staring back with eyes full of longing. Slowly, with trembling hands, he knelt on the ground and pulled his boy into his arms. The boy's small frame shook as he cried into his father's chest. The man's tears finally fell, his voice breaking as he whispered, "I am sorry. I have been blind. But I see you now." The crowd, moved to silence, watched a bond begin to mend. It was not perfect, it was not easy, but it was real. And in that raw honesty, respect and humility filled the air. Anna touched the boy's shoulder gently. "You are brave for speaking your truth." Sydney smiled softly. "And you are brave for listening to it," she told the father. The old man nodded. "This is compassion, not just words, not just gestures. It is the courage to face what hurts and choose love anyway." The boy clung to his father, and for the first time in a long while, hope felt possible. But as the crowd softened and the moment warmed, shadows lingered on the edges. Not everyone believed compassion could last beyond the moment. Whispers of doubt spread quietly, and in the distance, a figure watched them with cold eyes, waiting for the chance to turn kindness into conflict. When compassion is challenged, the father still held his son close, his arms tight around him as if letting go would mean losing him again. The boy's small fingers clutched his father's shirt, and for the first time in a long time, their hearts were speaking the same language. The crowd stood in silence, many wiping their own tears, many holding on to their loved ones with new awareness. It felt like the moment had reached its peak, a place of peace after so much pain. But peace rarely lasts without a test. From the edge of the street, a man in a dark coat stepped forward. His presence was heavy, his expression cold. He was a local shop owner, known for his harsh words and harder heart. His voice cut through the quiet like a knife. "Enough of this drama. You are blocking the street, making a scene, and turning private matters into a public show. What good is all this compassion when it solves nothing?" The words struck hard. The crowd murmured nervously. Some lowered their heads, unsure. Others clenched their fists in frustration. The boy's father stiffened, shame creeping back into his face. Keanu stood slowly, his eyes calm but unshaken. "What we are doing here is not a show. It is life. This boy needed to be seen, and now his father sees him. That is more powerful than you realize." The man sneered. "Words again. Always words. I see people every day begging for help. Does compassion feed them? Does it pay their debts? No. This is weakness. You fill their heads with hope only to leave them emptier than before." Anna stepped forward, her voice steady but kind. "Compassion is not weakness, it is strength. It does not solve every problem, but it begins the change. When we stop caring, when we stop listening, that is when nothing can ever be fixed." The man's face darkened. "You come here with your fame, with your soft hearts, but you do not know what it is like to suffer day after day. People like me work, struggle, and still the world spits on us. Where is compassion then?" Sydney, her eyes glistening, spoke softly but firmly. "Pain makes walls around the heart, but walls do not heal. Compassion cannot erase your suffering, but it can remind you that you are not alone in it. You speak of hardship, but maybe what you need most is what you are trying to push away." The crowd shifted uneasily, divided between doubt and hope. Some nodded at the shop owner's harsh words, others leaned toward the gentleness of Keanu, Anna, and Sydney. Tension grew like a storm cloud above them. Then the old man with the cane stepped forward, his voice trembling but strong. I know what bitterness feels like. I lived half my life blaming the world. I thought compassion was weakness too, but I was wrong. Bitterness gave me nothing but emptiness. Compassion gave me peace. You may not believe now, but one day you will see what it means to choose love instead of hate. The shop owner clenched his jaw, his fists tightening. Words are cheap, he muttered. At that moment, the boy, still holding his father's hand, stepped forward with surprising courage. His small voice rose above the noise. If compassion is nothing, then why do I feel hope for the first time? Why do I feel like I matter right now? The man froze, his eyes locked on the boy. Silence swept through the crowd. The boy's innocence, his honesty, had pierced the armor of anger like nothing else could. The shop owner's lips parted, but no words came out. His eyes softened for just a moment, though pride forced him to turn away. He muttered something under his breath and pushed back into the crowd, leaving the silence heavy behind him. Keanu looked at the boy with quiet pride. Sometimes the smallest voice carries the greatest truth. The crowd, shaken but inspired, began to clap softly, not as applause for celebrities, but as respect for the courage of a child who dared to speak. The boy held his father's hand tighter, his eyes no longer filled with fear but with strength. But deep in the crowd, unseen by most, the shop owner did not truly walk away. His bitterness still burned, and in his heart, he was not finished. He would return, and when he did, the test of compassion would grow far greater than anyone imagined. The storm of resentment. The evening air grew colder, the sun sinking low as shadows stretched across the street. The boy stood beside his father, still clutching his sketchbook tightly, while Keanu, Anna, and Sydney stayed close, their quiet presence giving strength. The crowd lingered, unsure whether to leave or remain. They felt something important was not yet finished. And they were right. From the edge of the square, the shop owner returned. This time, he was not alone. Two men walked beside him, both with the same hardened expressions, their faces marked by years of struggle. The crowd tensed as the three men pushed forward. The shop owner's voice rang out, louder and sharper than before. "Enough of this foolishness!" he shouted. "You speak of compassion like it is the answer to life's suffering. But compassion does not pay rent. Compassion does not heal empty stomachs. You are filling this boy's head with lies, telling him the world is kind when it is not." The father pulled his son closer, fear flickering across his face. The boy's shoulders trembled, but he did not hide. He looked up at Keanu, searching his eyes for courage. Keanu stepped forward calmly. His voice was low, but it carried across the crowd. "You are right that life is hard. I have seen hunger, loss, and loneliness. Compassion does not erase pain, but it gives us strength to face it. Without compassion, pain becomes chains that break us." The shop owner laughed bitterly. Strength comes from survival, not from soft hearts. People like me survive because we stop caring. That is reality. Anna shook her head, her tone steady and filled with quiet conviction. "You call it survival, but it is only existing. Survival without love is emptiness. Compassion is not weakness. It is what makes us human." The second man beside the shop owner growled, "You speak from comfort, not from suffering. You do not know what it is like to sleep cold, to eat nothing for days." Sydney stepped closer, her eyes bright with tears but strong with fire. "I know suffering. I have seen it. I have lived through rejection, fear, and nights where hope felt impossible. And yet, kindness was the only thing that gave me reason to rise again. Compassion is not a dream. It is survival of the soul. The crowd stirred. Some nodded with the shop owner, their bitterness rising. Others leaned toward the light in Keanu, Anna, and Sydney's words. The air felt heavy, as if the town itself stood at a crossroads. Then the boy, his small body trembling, took one shaky step forward. He clutched his sketchbook to his chest and raised his voice. I know the world is not easy. I know pain is real. But today I felt something different. I felt seen. I felt like I mattered. If compassion is a lie, then why do I feel alive for the first time? The crowd went silent. His voice was thin, but it carried more truth than all the arguments combined. The father placed a protective arm around his son. His voice cracked as he turned to the shop owner. You may call compassion weakness, but I almost lost my boy because I forgot it. I worked, I struggled, and I thought survival was enough. But he needed me to see him, to love him. Today, he reminded me, and I will not turn away again. The shop owner's face twisted with conflict. His anger burned, but cracks began to show. His fists loosened slightly. He looked at the boy, at the father, and at the crowd, which now waited silently for his response. The old man with the cane stepped forward once more. His voice trembled with age but rang with truth. Anger is heavy, my son. Bitterness is a chain that binds your heart. Compassion does not erase hunger, but it feeds the spirit. It does not fill pockets, but it fills lives. And if you cannot see that, then you are poorer than the hungriest man. The shop owner's lips parted, his breath shaky. His two companions looked uncertain, their eyes darting between him and the old man. The crowd leaned forward, every soul waiting for what would come next. And then, in that fragile silence, the shop owner's eyes began to glisten. He tried to hide it, tried to hold on to his bitterness, but the truth in the boy's words and the strength in the father's tears pierced through. His voice cracked as he whispered, I wanted someone to see me too, but no one ever did. The boy, innocent and unafraid, stepped closer and held out one of his drawings. I see you, he said simply. The paper shook in the boy's small hand, but the gesture carried a weight that no argument could break. The shop owner stared at the drawing, his anger breaking like glass. His shoulders slumped, his fists fell to his sides, and for the first time, he let his pride go. The crowd exhaled together, relief sweeping through them like wind after a storm. Compassion had not only survived, it had won. The day compassion became a movement. The street grew quiet after the storm had passed. The shop owner stood with his head lowered, the drawing still trembling in his hand. His companions no longer looked hardened but lost in thought, their eyes softening as the weight of anger faded. The boy, small yet brave, had given them something no one else had, a simple gesture that said, I see you. The crowd, who had come as strangers, felt their own hearts shifting. Many had walked into the moment as bystanders, but now they realized they were part of something far greater. Whispers turned into conversations, and conversations turned into commitments. People spoke of starting food drives, of helping children who felt unseen, of watching out for neighbors who lived in silence. Keanu looked around at the faces, his calm voice rising gently above the murmurs. This began with one child and 3 people who chose not to walk past, but today it belongs to everyone here. Compassion is not the duty of one, it is the strength of all. Anna, her eyes glistening, added softly, We came as strangers, but we leave as a community. What matters is not that we spoke words today, but that we carry them tomorrow. Sydney's voice, filled with quiet determination, carried to every ear. This story does not end here. Every one of you has the power to write the next page, not with a pen, but with your actions. The old man with the cane smiled, his wrinkles deepened by joy. I am old, but I have never seen a day like this. Today, a boy's tears became a lesson for us all. Today, compassion won. The father, still holding his son close, lifted his head. His voice was hoarse but firm. I was blind, but now I see. I will not let work steal my love from my child again. I will give him not only food, but my presence, my time, my heart. The boy pressed his sketchbook against his father's chest, whispering, "That is all I ever wanted." The crowd broke into quiet applause, not the kind given to stars on a stage, but the kind that rose from hearts awakened. Men and women wiped tears from their eyes, children clung to their parents tighter, and strangers looked at each other with new respect. The shop owner finally raised his head. His eyes were wet, his voice trembling. I was wrong. I thought compassion was weakness because I never received it, but today I felt it, and for the first time, I want to give it. The boy stepped forward again and hugged him, small arms wrapping around the man's waist. The shop owner froze, then slowly bent down and hugged him back, his bitterness breaking into something softer, something human. Keanu, Anna, and Sydney exchanged quiet glances, their hearts full. They had not come to make speeches or to lead a movement. They had only stopped to listen to a child. Yet from that single act, something much larger had been born. As the sun dipped low, golden light poured over the street. The moment felt timeless, as if the world itself paused to witness compassion becoming more than words. It became life. People began to leave, but they did not leave unchanged. They carried with them a promise, spoken or unspoken, to see others, to listen, to act. The town would not forget this day. The boy held his father's hand tightly as they walked home together, sketchbook safe under his arm. For the first time in years, his steps felt light, his heart no longer burdened by silence. And as the street emptied, the old man leaned on his cane and whispered to himself, "One act of compassion can change a heart, but many acts together can change the world."